Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In this video we're going to be going over the heart, its functions, how blood flows and moves around, all that, and including the valves. And I'm not going to be covering the sinoatrial node and the Purkinje fibers, etc. in this video, but I will be making a video on that later. So if you guys want that, please comment down below. And personally for me, I'm going to be doing this diagram with my knowledge in International Baccalaureate Biology HL. So that's IB. So if you're an IB student, that's great. Keep watching. But even if you're not, like, this will work for any Year 12 biology course. So keep watching as well. So anyways, let's just start off with how blood gets to the heart. You may recall that, so we have arteries, right, that carry blood away from the heart. And of course, along with arteries, we have veins that carry blood to the heart. Right, so arteries and veins, the easiest way to remember is A is for away and V is just the other one, so you can know that it's into the heart. So the two main veins that the heart has are the inferior vena cava, so inferior, I'll just write VC for vena cava, and the superior vena cava, right? So these terms I find quite easy to remember because, of course, vena sounds a lot like vein. And what they do is basically all the veins in the body from the lower part bunch up together and come to the inferior vena cava and then into the heart. And the superior vena cava, everything from the top bundles up together, the veins, the blood flows, collects into the superior vena cava and into this thing we call the right atrium. So this is weird because everyone gets this confused, but you'll get used to it eventually after some study. So the right side we label is actually the left side from our perspective because of course we're going to be looking at it from the perspective of a patient, say in like a clinical scenario. But what happens is this blood collects into the right atrium, and of course since this blood has been used by the body's organs, cells, etc., tissues, all that, it's going to be deoxygenated. It's going to have lots of carbon dioxide as waste, and all those cells that have used it have taken the oxygen to conduct cellular respiration, particularly aerobic. So what we have left is deoxygenated blood. Similar to the veins inside the heart, there are these things called valves, which are like flaps of tissue that open up one way but close up the other. So when blood is in the right atrium, it pulls in. It has to go down to the right ventricle, right? This bit right here. So blood has to move that way, but it's low pressure, so it can flow back, which is bad because if you have blood flowing back and forth in your heart, it'll ruin the rhythm of the heart and the cardiac cycle, and it'll do lots of bad things to you. So we don't want that. So what we have are these things called the valves. So this is particularly the tricuspid valve in the right side of the heart, and what it does is it allows blood to go through but not come back, so that's all good. And when blood collects in the right ventricle, next it has to go all the way through, and what it does is it goes through this thing called the pulmonary valve, right, and into the pulmonary arteries. So again, we're looking at arteries because there's blood away from the heart, but what's unusual is that this artery has deoxygenated blood, so I'm going to be drawing it in blue. So again, recalling the sides, this would be the right pulmonary artery, this would be the left pulmonary artery. So in other times we have the veins containing deoxygenated blood and then the arteries containing oxygenated, but it's switched around when it comes to the lungs. So our blood goes to the lungs, gets oxygenated and comes back. So we have these things called the pulmonary veins. So veins again, blood coming back to the heart, and this time pulmonary, so from the lungs. So since it's coming back from the lungs, it's going to be oxygenated. So we're going to draw this in blue. And it collects in this place called the left atrium. So the left atrium has oxygenated blood that then has to flow to the left ventricle, right? And again, we have valves here, but unlike the tricuspid valve, we have a bicuspid valve. And this bi and tri, you can recall, are words that mean like 2 and 3 respectively. So what that's got to do with the structure, I'm pretty sure, with the number of flaps. So the bicuspid contains 2 flaps and then tricuspid is divided into 3, something like that. But anyways, the blood collects in the left ventricle. From the left ventricle, then we go through this thing here. That's called the aorta, and the according valve here is going to be called the aortic valve. So I believe that it's quite easy to memorize these names because, of course, we have the pulmonary valve, tricuspid valve, bicuspid valve, and I think that the fact that it's called valve instead of something else is quite easy to remember, and especially pulmonary aortic because they're literally the blood vessels that it's going into. It's easy to remember. And tricuspid, just remember left is tri, right is bi. Just something like that. Left is tri, right is bi. Just make them just memorize that. And so what we have is blood flowing into the aorta, and the aorta is the largest artery in the body, and you can see these three pumps. It sort of looks like that one shroom plant in Plants vs Zombies, if you know what I mean. But anyways, it branches off into other arteries and pumps blood to the rest of the body. And also you may notice that these ones are poking up, so you may be like, okay, it's going up to the body, but where is it going? Well, what about down? What about the lower parts of the body? Well, you see this thing at the back? That's also the aorta, so it goes down. And alongside this, the aorta also branches into these things called coronary arteries, which supply the heart itself with blood. So the heart also needs its own blood because heart is a muscle, right? It has to spend lots of ATP doing its biz and just contracting, relaxing, all that. And that requires a lot of energy, so it needs lots of nutrients, cycling, waste removal, so it needs blood. But that's the cardiac cycle. Let's recap. We have the inferior vena cava, superior vena cava, blood into the right atrium, through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle, through the pulmonary valve into the pulmonary arteries, left this way, right this way. Remember it's inverted. And oxygenation of the blood. And then we have back through the pulmonary veins. This is oxygenated blood into the left ventricle, left atrium, sorry, and through the bicuspid valve into the left ventricle, where it then passes on through to the aorta, through the aortic valve, where it gets redistributed to the rest of the body. From the rest of the body, the tissues and cells at the capillary beds would exchange the oxygen and carbon dioxide, and we'll come back over here to the inferior vena cava, superior vena cava. We're back at the start of our cycle. So that's the good part about the blood flow because it's just over and over again. And the contractions in the blood are actually due to this part called the what's its name? It's called the sinoatrial node. So there's this it's the primary pacemaker of the lung, and it's actually of the heart. Sorry. So it's this part that's it's this nerve bundle in the right atrium, and what it does is it sends its own electrical impulse to the lower parts of the heart, so the ventricles, that simulates another contraction. So initially it simulates its own contraction and of like the atria, so the atria squeeze essentially, and then they go to the ventricles, where the sinoatrial node sends another signal to the ventricles to conduct a contraction. So that's basically what the pumping is, but I'll do a different video on that, so that explanation would have been pretty junky, but that's like a summary of it. And the important things to remember about the blood pumping are that the blood pumping is one, it's going to be a cycle, and two, the contractions are going to be myogenic contractions, so that means like it's generated literally by the heart itself. So when we move like a hand, right, we have to think about it, and that signal comes from our brain. But in the heart, the signal for the contraction itself originates from the heart. That's why we have cardiac muscle and smooth muscle being called involuntary muscles, because they just happen by itself. We don't have to think about beating our heart, right? And I think that's one of the cool parts about this part because it makes sense. But the other parts of the sinoatrial node that are important to note is the fact that the brain and nerve impulses can also affect the rate of contraction and the beating of the heart. So if you have signals from there's for the medulla of the brain, so your brain has this section called the medulla, and it sends signals through two main veins. So there's the cardiac and the vagus vein, and depending on which one it is, it can either slow down or increase the heart rate. And also you have, of course, your hormones, and then like let me just draw it as like a liquid here. So hormones seem like liquids. Your hormones such as like norepinephrine, or in common terms adrenaline, can also stimulate, make your heart beat faster. So there are other factors that affect the rate of beating of the heart. But this video, that was basically just a quick summary. If you don't get to watching my video on the heartbeat and how it's controlled by the sinoatrial node acting as a pacemaker. But the overall summary of this video is the blood flow in the heart. I hope that all made sense to you guys. Please feel free to comment down below, because this channel is not big like you guys. If one of you comments, that'll mean a huge thing for me. So if you just make a comment, I'll probably make a video, seriously. If you make a comment, I'll probably try and explain the topic, so I'm like a free tutor for you anyways. But hope you guys enjoyed the video. As always, leave a like if you can. That would be hugely appreciated, because like, yeah, small channel things, I guess. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. I'll be making more videos. It helps me revise and helps you guys, which makes me quite happy. So anyways, have a good one. Do well on your revision and study hard. Thanks.